Cities in eastern Ukraine, including Kharkiv and Mykolaiv, have been targeted in multiple Russian drone attacks. French police have arrested people involved in farmers' protests across the country for the first time. 18 demonstrators were reportedly detained near Paris. The European Union is stepping up pressure on Hungary ahead of the high-stakes summit on Thursday to agree on 4 years' worth of €50 billion of aid to Ukraine. Cities in eastern Ukraine have been targeted in multiple Russian drone attacks. In Kharkiv, several people were reported to have been injured when one of 6 Iranian-made drones exploded near a residential area. The blast damaged residential buildings over a wide area and left a deep crater in a road. The city has been targeted in air attacks many times since Russia's invasion almost 2 years ago.
Штурка спасла еще более-менее. Она, видно, стекло, и она вывалилась, мы уже выскочили. Отсюда, видишь, вот тут все завалено. А так бы нас покосило бы полностью. Как-то он всегда слышал, когда летит ракета, а этот раз я не слышал.
In Mykolaiv, a man was injured after an attack on a storage warehouse. Ukraine also claims to have damaged an oil refinery near St. Petersburg in Russia. Kyiv has stepped up strikes on Russian infrastructure in recent weeks.
Around 75,000 ethnic Hungarians reside in the Ukrainian region of Transcarpathia. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has long alleged that Ukraine's government is infringing upon their rights. In December, Kiev amended its education and language laws to comply with the EU's membership requirements, restoring many of the minority rights demanded by Budapest, much to the relief of the region's Hungarian community.
Az európai integráció volt az a katalizátor, amelyet végül is ezt az egész folyamatot úgy révbe segítette, és valószínűsíthető, hogy ez december 8-a Európai Uniós csúcs volt az a pont, ami elmozdította az ukrán-magyar kapcsolatoknak is a kérdését.
But Hungary is not fully satisfied with the reforms, a potential sticking point as EU leaders meet on Thursday to try to convince Orbán to lift his veto on a €50 billion aid package for Ukraine.
Most mi elmondtuk, hogy milyen pontokon látjuk a garanciáját annak, hogy a 2015-ös állapotokhoz valóban vissza tudjunk térni. Kormányközi bizottság munkáját pedig reméljük, hogy siker fogja koronázni.
Hungary has made 11 specific requests to Ukraine. They include restoring the status of the national school, allowing a high school diploma to be taken in Hungarian, and enabling the use of the Hungarian language in public life.
The European Union has stepped up pressure on Hungary ahead of the high-stakes summit on Thursday to agree on 4 years' worth of €50 billion of aid to Ukraine. In the last European Council meeting in December, Hungary vetoed the initiative. Now, many member states have lost patience with Viktor Orbán systematically misusing his veto power. Now they are ready to act.
We have never seen such an isolation for a new member state against other EU member states, and it really seems to be a test for the European Union on how much it can handle its internal disagreements.
Now, EU institutions and member states are trying desperately to find solutions. Possible alternatives could be financing Kyiv outside of the EU's budget with the remaining 26 countries. Other countries are demanding that the EU strips Hungary of its voting rights by stepping up the so-called Article 7 process, a sanctions regime already in place against Budapest because of democratic backsliding.
We shall see whether the leaders will have enough patience to negotiate with Viktor Orbán, or whether they will undertake this new way by using of Article 7, but it's just a speculation.
Hungary earlier signalled it would be open to an agreement if the EU would allow an annual check-up on the Ukraine package. This was rejected by other countries. Budapest also demanded more of the EU funds for Hungary be unfrozen. The funds in total make up €20 billion.
Orbán still has a kind of transactional logic, which means that if he receives good offers, it means that he can abandon his vetoism and obstructivist approach in the decision-making process, but I don't think it can solve the long-term problem. And the long-term problem seems to be that the legal system and political system of Hungary seems to be unfit to the institutional structures and the values of the European Union.
Ukraine desperately needs EU aid to continue its defence against Russia's aggression. It is also dealing with the fact US aid for Kyiv is also currently being blocked by Congress. In an unprecedented move, French police have arrested people involved in ongoing farmers' protests across the country. 18 demonstrators were reportedly detained as they tried to blockade a major food distribution hub near Paris. Workers in the agriculture sector are seeking higher wages, help with rising costs, and less regulation. The government sought to address their concerns with a number of concessions, but it failed to bring an end to the rallies. The authorities say they are deploying 15,000 police officers, mostly in the Paris region, to stop any effort by protesters to enter the capital. There were similar protests elsewhere, as seen here in Italy. Farmers have taken to the streets in several countries across the EU in pursuit of similar aims. Governments are trying to address their issues ahead of European elections in June.
2 years after walking out of the Stormont Parliament in Belfast, the pro-British DUP have decided to return. At issue for the past 2 years has been the notional trade border in the Irish Sea as part of the Brexit Windsor framework. The DUP say it isolated Northern Ireland from GB, but now say 2 years on they have persuaded the British government and the EU to drop the notional border. However, the real story arising from the change of heart from the DUP is that the pro-British party has agreed to enter a parliament where Sinn Féin Vice President Michelle O'Neill will become the first ever Irish nationalist to head up the Northern Ireland regional government.
This is the first time ever that Sinn Féin has come in as a nationalist party. It's the largest party in Northern Ireland, and it's a big shock for many unionists, including for many in the DUP.
The elevation of Catholic Michelle O'Neill to the role of First Minister gives Irish nationalism in Northern Ireland the dominant political position. On the streets of Belfast, the proposed resumption of the Parliament has been welcomed.
I think she'd be very capable, but we need all our politicians working for us.
We're now seeing more Catholics than Protestants. Finally, there's that shift has happened. That might mean a nationalist First Minister. It might mean 10, 15 years' time, we'll be looking at a referendum the same way that Scotland has.
However, some British unionists say Michelle O'Neill and Sinn Féin are being rewarded for bombing their way to the negotiating table.
Well, in the morals of Northern Ireland, it's an horrendous shift, because this is a lady who tells us that there's no alternative to mass murder, no alternative to the incineration of people in hotels, no alternative to atrocities like Enniskillen on Remembrance Day, like King's Mills, where Protestants were taken off a bus and done to death because they were Protestants.
The future of the Stormont Parliament here in Belfast now falls on Brussels and London to make the appropriate amendments to the Windsor Framework document, with Sinn Féin set to occupy the First Minister seat for the very first time in its history. Expect calls to grow louder for a unification of Ireland referendum in the coming years. This is Ken Murray for Euronews, Belfast, Northern Ireland.
The French Parliament has overwhelmingly approved the inclusion of the right to abortion in the French constitution, with 493 votes for and 30 against. The constitutional reform promised by President Macron after a rollback of abortion rights in the US was backed by the centrist coalition and left-wing groups. The text now heads to the Senate, where it could face opposition. Although France's major political parties support the right to abortion, some centre-right Senate members oppose enshrining it in the Constitution.
Fans of Taylor Swift and other top artists may soon not be able to access their songs on TikTok because of a dispute between Universal Music Group and the social media platform. UMG has accused TikTok of trying to bully it into accepting what it says is a bad deal on music rights fees. The current deal was set to expire within 24 hours of the online statement, and the music publisher said it would withdraw all its songs unless it receives an improved offer.
Meet Sándor Kereki, the Hungarian photographer who takes you back to the streets of Budapest in the 1970s. Given a camera by his father at the age of 16, he spent the next 10 years wandering the streets of the city where he captured everyday moments.
Az ember megy, az utca. Talál valami érdekeset, amiről lehet, hogy mikor hazamegyek és lennagyítom, akkor kiderül, hogy mégsem olyan érdekes. Nincs ezekben semmi különös, tehát nincs benne tervszerűség. Az egyetlen tervszerűség az, hogy próbáltam nem beavatkozni.
Kereki's completed piece consists of 7,000 exposed negatives. Each of the photographs on display is intriguing, evokes memories, and in few occasions, some have recognized themselves or a relative.
Ennél meghatóbbat nem sikerült még csinálnom, végignézve a többi képet is. Szerencsém volt, a világítás is jó volt, belefutottam. Megtaláltam, és óriási szerencse, hogy megtaláltam, mert az utcán történt ugyan, de azért ilyet minden nap nem lát az ember.
In 2021, 1,800 images were uploaded to a digital photo website named Fort Pan. In some cases, they're still available to view in the archive. Is open until February 4th.